Welcome to Nature Knows, Conversations with Wild Warriors and Changemakers. I'm your host, Jen Vitanzo, and this podcast is all about nature, both the wild kind outside our front doors and the human kind written within our DNA. Each episode showcases an individual who has dedicated their efforts to create a better today to ensure we have an actual tomorrow, and they are using their unique creative fingerprints to do it. These are the wild warriors and changemakers constructing the bridges necessary to connect us all, human to human, species to species, worlds to worlds. So today's guest is a woman named Ashley Jones. She's she's actually the founder of Black Truth Media. And she is the definition of the multi-hyphenate. She was a magazine editor and founder. She has radio shows. She's an author. She's an artist. The biggest question with her is really when she sleeps. So I'm very excited to introduce her to you today. So without further ado, please welcome Ashley Jones.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. So I've been listening to your little podcast stuff. I've been trying to catch up on the radio snippets,
Yes.
the Black Motivation broadcast. Yeah, so much stuff. So really, truly, when do you sleep?
Not often, right? I wake up early in the morning, you know what I mean? I roll to the end of the day, for sure.
I love it. Cool. So what I'd love to get is essentially a little bit about your journey, just a little bit of background about you, where you started, and essentially where you want all of this headed towards and sort of what your goals are. Just a little bit, just a background about you and your story.
Sure. So let's start from the beginning, right? So I first, delved into the journalism, the media, role in position when I started my magazine, the Staccato Beat magazine back in 2012. So I was interviewing, different celebrities, different industry leaders, but it really started out with me just interviewing my friends who were doing positive and powerful things in the work in which they did. So I started that in February, and then in April, I went to go see Pastor Shirley Caesar get crowned the Queen of Gospel, one of only 3 members of the press who could photograph the event. So I kind of kick-started off, right, everything that you see me doing now today. So that's kind of, my journey from the beginning. And then now I do the Black Motivation broadcast, which is where I, again, interview different celebrities, industry leaders, entertainment professionals, right? And really have them speak their truth, tell their story, and really shed advice and light on the industries in which they operate in. So I've interviewed Grammy Award-winning musicians, Emmy-nominated actors, some of the people you may know, some of the people you may have heard of their shows, like Greenleaf and The Haves and the Have-Nots. I interviewed Carl Kennedy, who is an actor on those, and a choreographer who did a video for Jordan Sparks, Jamal Joseph, her last video, Red Sangria, that just came out last August. So yeah, I just have had an amazing, journey connecting with and networking and getting to know people, and that's, kind of how it started.
And that seems to be a big part of your ethos in terms of that building that community of connection and sharing stories. Because for all of us, the humans, we communicate through story. That's how we operate. We are social beings. We need to feel that connection. We need to sort of find our tribe, so to speak.
Right.
And it looks, of all the stuff that you're doing, it seems like a coherent thread through all of it, which is essentially to share and to find these commonalities between us and to show people that it's, this is all happening around us and you can be part of it and there's a place for you with all of this. I love that. Yeah. So did you come from, in terms of, did you study journalism in school? Did you, what was your trajectory with all of this? Was it just I'm just going to do this because I really believe in what I'm doing? Or was there a set path, this is where I began with a field of study, or was it really for me, I was much of a learn on my own, learn by doing?
Yeah. For sure. So it's kind of a combination. So my major in school, my initial major was political science. Then I found that was not me, right? So my next major was theater. I was a thespian, so I used to act in school, and I also got into kind of the behind the scenes as well. And when I kind of made that transition, so I was a lighting designer, I did sound, I did a lot of the behind the scenes work in school, and then also in the DC metropolitan area, right, in the theater scene. So that's kind of where it grew out of. It grew out of my work in theater. and in technical theater specifically, which is what my major was.
Hmm. And did you find that, like, what I have found in my own journey is that doing all these different things has been so incredibly valuable and showing how everything is connected and how you need each part for everything to
For
work.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was acting on the stage before I got into technical theater, right? I saw the lights, I saw the sound. I kind of had a concept of how it all worked together. But once I started getting behind the scenes, once I started studying lighting, right, and the colors, and you know what I mean, everything that goes into like putting together this performance and making each moment happen, right? That's really where I started to understand the inner workings and how it's all connected and intertwined. And I kind of think I take that background from being in technical theater and I bring it into what I do now because I'm saying, hey, this is how, this is the inner workings of the entertainment industry, for example, or the medical industry, or, the law field, right? I have people really talk their talk, like I say, and speak their truth on what the behind the scenes looks like in their everyday lives.
Right.
So yes, I think that that's, like you said, a common thread that kind of like shifts through what I do.
And you grew up in the DC area, yeah?
Correct.
Am I
Yeah.
right? Okay. Do you think that influenced a lot of this?
For
It's funny
sure.
you say you were political science and then went into theater. I'm like, oh, it sounds very similar actually when you think about it. There's so much
Yeah.
theatrics within the political,
Right. Yeah.
you know? But again, it's having a stage in many ways, like everything else. It's having a stage to speak out and have
Right.
a platform. And,
Yeah.
we think of things like theater and entertainment as being the only, but in fact, we all have our own special platforms and ways of getting our message out. And you've managed to cross over so many of them in really interesting ways that really connect with people.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we met in a random thing in
Right.
Clubhouse. Speaking of connections,
Yes.
that whole little microcosm, which is becoming a macrocosm in many ways,
Yeah.
of networking and social, and not just networking in the sense of, oh, well, what can I do for this person? What can they do for me? But
Yes.
networking in the sense of, again,
Yeah.
building that community and
Right.
finding people that are like-minded. And what I have been really fascinated, which is probably partially why I cottoned on to you too,
Yeah.
um, is there are so many people involved in that community that are really, they're go-getters and they want to create positive change.
Exactly.
They look at the status quo and they say, okay, some of this might be working, but a lot of it isn't. And it might be working in some respects for a small proportion of the world or the
Yeah.
society, whatever, but it's not working for the big picture.
Right.
And we're watching, especially now, this past year, with the pandemic and everything, and all the Black Lives Matter protests and everything, there's been a lot that has been sort of pushed under the rug. Like, that's just, we're not going to worry about that because that sort of interrupts the whole status quo right now. And I'm loving all of these voices coming out and saying, no, we're not going back under the rug. Like, this is something that we have needed to address forever.
Right. Exactly.
And
now
and so
we are.
right. And so having these voices come out and listening to you speak and talking about what you've been doing, I just think it's inspiring on so many levels. And I love it. I love what you're doing. I love the Black Magic Minute that you talked about.
Yeah.
You got to tell us about that because people need to listen to this because first of all, I think it's genius, the names that you've come up with all of these. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about, we talked about, you did the magazine, you're your own podcast host in your own right. You are a radio personality. You're also an artist, which I didn't realize. You sing, yes?
I do.
So you said you did the theater. You've written a book.
Yes.
Like, what have you not done besides like save the world?
Right. Well, I try to do a little bit of that too.
Right. Well, you're on that trajectory as well. So you're doing that too.
Right.
Yeah. So talk to me like the radio. Let's talk about the Black Magic Minute. Let's talk about Black Motivation Broadcast.
Sure.
How did you essentially get involved in that? Is that just something that you just started on your own, or you made some connections and just kind of got okay?
Sure.
So let's talk about sort of the genesis of that.
Sure. I got invited to the Underground Southern Soul Awards last year to cover it, through some of my connections that I had made through interviewing for the Black Motivation Broadcast, right? And at the Underground Southern Soul Awards, I met the awesome Ray Daniels, who is the host of the Ray Daniels Morning Show. And, after several conversations, networking, he invited me to have my own segment on the show. He invited me to name it, everything like that. And I was like, what do I want to call it? Right? And I think about, Black Girl Magic and Black Boy Joy as kind of like some things that are trending, but also some things that are really important to me to, celebrate and highlight. Because that's what those are. They're, celebrations of moments in our history and in our culture and what's going on right now. And so I decided to call my segment the Black Magic Minute to highlight and to, really celebrate some of the people that I've come across in my journeys who are doing positive and powerful things in the work in which they do and really doing it up, right, in their chosen respective fields.
Right.
And
Right.
so, as far as the Black Motivation broadcast, similarly, the Black Motivation broadcast is kind of born out of the pandemic, so that's like my little pandemic baby. I started my business 2 years ago in 2019, and I was doing a lot of events, event planning, stuff like that. And then the pandemic hit, and it's just like, yo, we are not meeting in person right now. So I had to kind of pivot, right, which was the word of 2020. I pivoted, and I was like, let me go back to my roots and let me start this live stream video podcast and really take some of the connections that I made in the past, some of the connections I'm currently making through different avenues, and really celebrate people and really bring people together and show people, the people that I'm interviewing, the people that are watching, like you said, how we're all connected and how we can all help each other to grow in our respective careers.
Right. And I think what I really love about that too is the fact that you've built so much upon so much. So you've taken each step of your journey and you've capitalized on it and you've turned it into, and not in a, this is how you work in business and this is how you do it. It's more like an organically, I have built this world through the steady work in this, and I have found these connections with this, which is another area that I worked, and you found those connections and you built upon it and took the theme through it all and just kept creating more and more and more from it.
Right.
And I know, and you've probably heard this too, as working in the entertainment industry, there's always that idea of the overnight sensation, which we all know working in the field it doesn't exist.
Right.
It's like, it is always years and years and years of work behind the scenes or in other capacities doing stuff and putting in the time to build that groundwork that you need as your foundation to be able to launch into that next trajectory. And so much of, essentially, all of what you've been doing really fits into that and has been building this solid foundation. And I feel like for people listening everywhere, that's so important to showcase is that it doesn't just happen because you show up. No. Showing up, very important. You have to show up.
For sure.
But you've got to do a lot of the quote unquote grunt work to a degree, even if it, I always feel like that's such a weird word to say because it sounds awful, but it's more of the footwork behind the scenes, like you said, like laying, it's like building a house. You've got to lay that foundation. You've got to put that work in to make sure you've got a solid ground to stand on before you start building up and out,
Right. Yeah. I totally, completely agree, right? Like, if I hadn't started that magazine back in 2012 and grinded for those 6 years, right? I did it from 2012 to 2018, really building my name, building connections, building a reputation for, having great interviews, not asking crazy questions, right? Making my guests feel comfortable in my space, right? I wouldn't have been able to go back to those same people, some of them, and say, hey, I'm doing this podcast now. Do you want to be a guest on the podcast, right? So I laid the foundation, like you said, over the years. So now I can go to someone and say, hey, do you want to interview me? Can I interview you? And they're like, yes.
And you didn't treat them like a thing. You didn't treat them like an entity. You treated them like a person.
Right.
Which is, I think, especially in this past year.
Yeah.
But so much we find ourselves, I think, more and more with social media especially. It's so ironic that social media is so incredibly isolating in many ways. Because we like kind of exist in these weird silos. And with all the algorithms and everything, we're even further pushed into these silos. And so it actually takes effort to step outside of that and expand that reach. And you're dealing with people in the sense of dealing with them in relationship-wise.
Right.
Builds, like you said, that comfort, that you build a trust.
Yeah.
And that is so incredibly important with all of this, is that finding that trust. And again, feeling like, making people feel like they matter, because they do.
Right.
Yeah.
They do.
As themselves, not because of necessarily what they do,
right.
because of who they are, and that they have that incredible unique voice that has something to contribute to the world, and embracing that and sitting there and saying, I see you. I see you, not what's on your resume, that's great, it's part of you.
Exactly.
But yeah.
A great example of that is one of my recent interviews that I did with Joshua Pyram.
Oh, he's awesome.
Mascot of Wild 'N Out, right? And his interview was amazing. He shared so much insight, so much, life was given in that interview. And somebody might look at it and just like, oh, he's just the mascot behind Wild 'N Out, right? He's just a mascot, but he was able to share so much value, and it is so cool, right, to accomplish that, right? And we want to celebrate that, which is why I wanted to have him on the show. That's like an
Right.
example, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah, and he's firecracker. He's
it's
great,
so
and
much fun,
I learned so much more about him listening to your show
right?
because I knew him from exactly what you said,
Right,
and then I was like, oh, there's so much depth. And he was talking about he's Haitian and growing up in New
right.
York and that whole
Mm-hmm.
dynamic of that, and it's amazing how each of us like where we grow up, how
Mm-hmm.
that affects our future in terms
Right.
of in weird ways. Like either some people stay in that
Yes.
bubble and they don't want to ever
Mm-hmm.
leave it and it's very comfortable
Mm-hmm.
and it works for them and their capacity. And other people, like for me, I was like, I can't wait to get out. Like I love where I grew up. It was beautiful. It was a great way to
Mm-hmm.
like great place to
Mm-hmm.
grow up. But it was
Yes.
I couldn't wait to get out of there because there was this whole huge world out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So oh,
Yeah. Oh, nice
sorry, I
one.
need some water.
Yes.
So you also have a book that you have written.
Yes. I
Okay,
have.
let's talk about your book.
Okay.
What was the whole process like? It's a series of devotionals. Am I
Mm-hmm.
yes?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now how that process. So
Mm-hmm.
I published a book. I self-published a book about 2 years ago.
Okay.
How did you work through your process with all of that?
Sure. So I started a blog back in 2010, and the voice of the blog was one single lady, right? So I didn't give my name as the voice of the blog, but I literally talked about different things that single Christian women go through, right? Different issues, different situations. I talk about friendship. I talk about relationships. I talk about God and our relationship with God. So I just talk about different things in the blog, and I started getting like people talking to me about like why don't we make a book out of this, right? And it was interesting because I had different people comment on the blog and be like, even guys, like, hey, this really helps me understand my single sisters better. So it was just really, really cool to get all this feedback. So I decided back in 2011 to stop doing the blog for a little bit and start producing this book. And so I was taking a lot of the content from the blog and also new experiences and new content over the years to really create this book. And I had finally decided in 2017, I think it's ready to publish, but I had to kind of make a decision because of the way the book was laid out. It was initially laid out as a chapter book. And for whatever reason, just in my spirit, that wasn't the right direction to go in. So I thought about it, prayed about it, and I was like, let's make this a 31-day book of devotions. And so really like break down everything that I accumulated or amassed into these like really relatable bites that you can take with you with the scriptures that have been given to me, the words, the advice from grandmothers, sisters, aunties, everybody, right? And really make it easier to digest. And so that's why I came up with the idea to make it a 31-day devotional.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. That's
Thank you.
it's such a brilliant idea.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
then in terms of publishing and everything, what route did you go through?
I
Did you end,
use Create Space
okay.
no longer, right? Amazon now has Amazon Kindle Publishing, Kindle Direct Publishing. But I initially went through Create Space, which was an Amazon affiliate, to publish the book. Yeah, and
Okay.
so it's still available on Amazon. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure I'm going to make sure I put links for all of this stuff within the
Awesome.
podcast so that you can find all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the publishing it's fun. All of this stuff I think is so interesting and fun that
Yeah.
it's a whole other way of showing sort of your creativity, but sharing your story
Right. Yeah.
and sharing your experiences so that again, we don't feel alone. Like
Right.
going through and saying, hey, I have been there. This is my story, and someone
Right.
else reading it saying, "Oh man, I feel that I am so right there with you, and I have
Yeah.
definitely been through that." Or they haven't been through it, like you said,
Mhm.
with guys. I mean, I know that the whole Me Too movement, especially, so
Yeah.
many of my guy friends were shocked,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was like,
Mm.
none of the women are.
Right. Right. Yeah.
None of the women are.
Right.
All the men were like, I can't even believe the number of women that I know. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, well, when you start sharing the stories, you start
Mm.
seeing all these underlying connections and the fact that a
Right.
lot of things are a lot more widespread than we
Yeah.
thought.
Exactly.
And
And really
having,
with the book also, one of the reasons why I wanted to make the book was because there's some women, not saying all women or not saying a lot of women, but there's some women who don't have those mentors or those other women who are speaking into their lives. So they don't get access to some of the information, right, that would have been shared by a grandmother or a big sister or an auntie or whoever. So I really wanted to really share those experiences, my experiences, as well as the experiences of others who have poured into me, so I can pour into others through the book.
Right. And that brings up actually a really good point, which is, I'm sorry, I haven't had a scratchy throat all morning, so I apologize for the. I'm trying to keep muting myself so you don't hear me like clearing my throat, making these horrible noises. Uh, so that brings up the point of actually mentors, which is a big
Right.
thing, and I think it's been overlooked a lot in
Mhm.
terms of finding mentors. And there's been this sort of push of a mentor has to be someone who's been super successful in your fields that you can.
Right.
But mentors, really, like you said, can be from grandmothers, from sisters, from
Yeah.
it can be from anyone
Mhm.
who can give you some sort of guidance and who has
Right.
an experience that they can share with you that can help you on your journey.
Right.
What, in terms of your mentors, who have been really, really powerful mentors for you?
Mhm. Sure. So definitely in my church, right? Because I'm a spiritual person. Obviously, in my church, I've definitely had women who have really poured into me. One of them I want to mention. Her name is Miss Deb. She's my mentor, Miss Deb. She's like a play auntie, right? But she really pours into me. Like whenever I need advice, whenever I need guidance. It doesn't necessarily always have to be like business advice, right? Like you said, because it doesn't have to be someone who's been super successful in the industry in which you're trying to operate in. It could be a life mentor or a life guide, right? So she's definitely been one of the mentors for me as well. And growing up, I had a big sister, right? I'm the oldest, but I had a big sister, Michelle Stewart, who is now her husband is a pastor and they pastor a church in Texas. And so she was kind of like one of my guides, and she's one of the biggest voices, right? If you read through the book, she's one of the biggest voices that you'll hear unannounced, right? So I'm giving her this platform to say, hey, Michelle Stewart. Yes, she was definitely influential in my life. Again, from a personal perspective more so than a business perspective. But yes, she definitely helped shape and help guide me as I grew as a woman, right, in my life.
And that's the truth. That growth is the biggest thing too. Is that
Mm-hmm.
this all stems from growth too. It's
Yes.
you're constantly shifting and moving, and as
Yes.
you know, we're constantly growing in some capacity or another. Sometimes very painfully. I mean, growth I think by default is somewhat painful.
Yes.
Because it's the whole
100%.
concept of like a seed cannot become a tree without breaking through the shell.
Right. Right. Right.
It sounds very violent, but
Yeah.
it is true. And
Yes.
it's the growing pains of learning and developing, and the hardships, the challenges, the difficulties. But my experience has always been the hardest stuff has always become the most valuable. It might
Yes.
not seem like it at the time. It might seem like the worst thing at the time. I might just want to power through it and just get through it. But
Right.
looking back, it's become the most valuable. They've been the most valuable learning tools. And there's that whole concept of you've survived the worst days of your life already.
Right.
You
Right.
can keep going.
Just keep going, right? If
Yeah,
you're able to survive in the past, you'll be able to survive whatever you got in the future. Because now you have new tools, right, to handle and to deal with the situations that will arise. I totally agree with that.
right. So a lot of what you're doing with the creative process, I know from my
Mhm.
experience, there's a whole lot of rejection. There's a whole lot of no's.
Right.
And you just got to keep powering through it. What has been
Hmm.
for you? What have been some of the hardest lessons that you've learned, but that have really, truly kept you going and really inspired you to continue on that trajectory?
Sure. So one of the hardest lessons that I've learned, as far as the knows, is that you gotta have a big social media following, right? Like you can be amazing, you can be great, you can be talented at what you do. At the end of the day, you know what I mean. You gotta have that pull, you gotta have that draw for certain people in order to get to the next level of interviews. So instead of saying like, "Hey, Dad, I don't have a big social media following, or I don't have this, or I don't have that," it really pushes me and propels me to continue to grow and continue to work hard and work to the next level of success, right? And success is defined by yourself. So for me, success is not necessarily the biggest social media following, like 13 million followers, right? Success for me is being able to touch and identify how I can reach that one or two or three people who need to hear what I'm saying in order to take their career to the next level, right? And if I have somebody come back to me and say, hey, that really touched me, or a publicist, right? Say, hey, that interview was awesome. Definitely have some people I want to refer you to in the future to work with, right? That is success for me because it's me continuing to build, right? Continuing to grow and continuing to connect, which is, some of the goals that I have personally for success for me.
Right. And it is always such a balancing act because there is
Mhm.
that desire to have as many followers and as many
Right.
people sort of in your stable as
Mhm.
possible
Mhm.
because we have started equating numbers and higher
Right.
numbers with that
Mhm.
means you're successful. But there's the flip side of it, which is exactly what you said, which is
Mhm.
you can build stronger, you might have a smaller following, but you
Mhm.
have individual contact and you've really touched those people. So you've built a sort of a rabid base of people that they love what you do and they
Right.
connect with you,
Yes.
and your message is truly hitting upon someone in a way that is meaningful, and
Right.
so those connections actually end up becoming more powerful
Right.
because there's something behind them as opposed to just a
Right.
click that says like or what, it's
Right.
an
Right.
actual, yeah. And that's always
Mhm.
like a challenging balance is you want to
Right.
find that but you still want to grow it because you
Right.
need to be, expand the reach, and
Right.
also you have such great messages to be getting out there, so
Yes.
it
I
should be
totally
getting
agree.
out to more people.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I agree. Like you said, it's a balancing act, even mentally, right? To say, like, hey, I'm not going to sacrifice what my messaging is or what I'm doing to reach that higher or larger following. However, I do want that higher or larger following, so I need to figure out what I need to do to get it. And
Right.
within my values, within my morals, and within my goals.
Right. And that's always a big thing too, is
Yes.
remembering where your lines are, because each one of
Right.
us has different lines in terms of
Yes.
what's acceptable for us and what our brand. And that was an interesting, I actually was listening to a conversation yesterday with people about your brand, and
Mhm.
that it's not just about creating a brand, it's creating a brand that resonates truly with who you are and is in line with who
Yes.
you are. And your brand is absolutely very much in line with your mission and your ideas and what you want to get out there,
Right.
and that is so important because how, I mean, going into, have you ever had a job where you've basically been like, I hate this is not at all in line with me, and I,
Can't do it anymore. Yes,
yeah,
for sure.
yes,
Everyone has that job during their career, for sure. Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
that soul sucking where you're like, I know it's a paycheck, I know I'm getting experience out of this, but
Right.
it is so out of touch with who I am as a human and what I care about and what
Right.
matters to me, that I feel like it's like painful to
Right.
go,
The ends justify the means only to a certain extent, right?
Exactly, exactly, and finding that balance.
Yeah.
For you, what I would say, where do you find that balance? Like when because you have so many things going on, which
Right.
I get, um, and it is always very hard to find when you have a lot of things pulling you in a lot of directions, and they're all great things, and they all have equal merit and equal. Where do you find sort of a balance? How do you maneuver that? Or are you like me, where I'm like, I don't have any balance. I just whatever, as just constantly shifting.
Sure. So I definitely in that balance. When I hear balance, I remember Josh Pyron's interview, a lot of Cordero Davis's interview, who is the sexy chef, the celebrity chef that I interviewed. One of the things that they talked about is work-life balance, right? And so I definitely am a huge proponent of mental health awareness, taking care of your mental health as well as taking care of yourself, right? So like I go out to eat. I take well prior to the pandemic, right? Not like ordering in, right? Like I definitely take time out to pamper myself and really, take care of Ashley, right? Because if I can't take care of Ashley, I can't take care of anyone else, right? So if I don't make sure that my mental is taken care of, my physical is taken care of, right, the needs and the things that I've got going on, then I can't be as worthy of the opportunities that in my mind, right, that I'm going to be presented with. So for me, it's definitely all about, like, let's say prior to the pandemic, 2019, right? I was going to comedy shows. I was, taking myself out to eat, getting my nails done, and all that good stuff. Still do, right? But I definitely take care of myself and make sure that I take care of my spiritual health as well. Like I read a lot of books in my spare time. Like so I got a lot going on
In
in
your spare time.
my spare
What spare
time.
time?
My spare time that doesn't work, right?
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But you're good. That's great because you're carving it out, and that's
Right.
so important.
It is. Yeah.
I know there's that saying of, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I
Right.
am definitely poking holes in that though, because it is always work. It
Hmm.
is always work. And I mean, I'm the first to admit that the administrative side of what I do
Yeah.
is work.
Right.
Like
Right.
Excel is not my friend. I mean, I understand Excel has a lot of value, but
Right.
things like spreadsheets and the administrative,
Mhm.
just not my thing. But
Right.
you power through it because it is part of the whole picture. And
Right.
so
Exactly.
it is work. It is hard. And it is, I mean, as much as it fuels you, it's also exhausting
Yes.
because it is a constant, it's constant forward motion.
Right.
So
Mhm.
finding ways to carve out and say, this is going to separate me so I can shut off that bit and
Right.
let it recharge, let it
Yeah.
rest.
Mhm.
Um, a friend of mine who was a coach one time said something to me, and I was like, that's amazing. I am never going to forget that. He said,
Right.
there's the create space and there's the recreate space.
I like it.
And I always think recreate. I'm like, what? And then I was like, oh my gosh, recreation.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right.
Now I get, because it's
Yeah.
not, you never hear it that way.
Right.
So I was like, the creation space is a space where you're doing what you love and you're passionate, and that's your workspace.
Mhm.
And then you need to and you're fueling with that to a degree, but there's another side of you that needs to refuel with the rest. Even if the rest is you're running, hiking
Right.
mountains. Some people, that's their rest, which
Right.
is not me. But um, I love mountains. I
Right.
like to look at them. I
Right.
actually like to like hike them too, but not, that's not whatever. Anyway,
Right. Yeah.
but that recreate space is that space
Mhm.
where you can go to recharge
Yes.
and turn off the creation space and give you the
Yeah.
time to percolate a lot of the stuff that's going in the create space and give your
Right.
body the chance to recuperate, rejuvenate.
Right.
And that is so important.
I
And you are,
totally agree. I take that time, right? So it may even be like 11, 12 o'clock at night, right? But at the end of my day, I might just be on Facebook,
yeah,
supporting my friends, liking, sharing, watching their content, right? But just taking that time out to not be doing me, something about me. Whether that is watching a comedian on Netflix or, reading a book, like I said, somebody else's book, right? I'm taking that moment to just decompress and
right.
not be doing something that's related to my business or my brand. For sure, I definitely take those moments.
And you talked about food and you talked about comedy, two of which are very much fueling. Laughing is huge,
Yes, for
especially in
sure.
this past year. There's been a
Yes,
lot to not laugh about,
right,
and a lot to laugh about, depending on what your perspective is,
right, right, right.
and making, looking for a silver lining. But it
Mhm.
is so true. Like also the food, the fueling,
Yes,
literally physically fueling us. And so
yes,
you're doing. Speaking of, you're doing events. So you're doing an event coming up
yes,
with a chef.
yes.
What
Growing
was
Moss.
it? Grown Women Brunch? Is that
Yes,
what it's
I'm doing
called?
the Grown Women Brunch.
I love
Yes,
it.
I'm so excited about this event, partnering with Don Moss, who I partnered with before with my previous iteration of my business, right, when we did event planning. But we will be doing the Grown Women Brunch, which is where we'll be doing a cooking class for the ladies. And then the ladies will be able to sip on something while they're watching, right? I'm going to have this brunch experience where I'm going to send these curated boxes of different like items like an apron, you know what I mean, a spoon, spatula, different branded items so that they can really participate and feel a part of the experience together, right? While we're watching Dawn cook something fun and fabulous.
Right.
So I'm really excited about that event because I was actually on Clubhouse a couple of months ago, and we were talking in the event planning room about different ways of making events more inclusive while we're not in the same space, right? So I thought if I could take this, this idea of being inclusive and sending out a box where women are like, with a little cup, right, that we can all sip on together, right? Like little different items to really tie the experience in together. We're all like looking at Dawn making this fabulous dish. We're all learning together. So I'm even going to be learning. I don't know what the dish is yet. Right? We're all going to be learning this together. So
That's awesome.
we're all part of this experience.
And food is such a communal thing.
Yes.
It traditionally has always been, uh, creating food, eating food. It's been a community
Right.
experience, and
Yes.
especially, I mean, this last year, it's been taken away in many ways because we can't get out and gather in these
Right.
groups. We can't easily get out to. Well, it depends on what state I guess you're in.
Right. Right.
But
Well,
every,
whatever. Right.
some states, whatever, do whatever you
Yeah.
want.
Right.
But yeah, like that whole element of sort of breaking bread, speaking of
Mm-hmm.
spirituality too,
Yes.
the concept of breaking bread together
Yes.
and
And also
being,
learning from another woman, right?
yes,
Having that woman, come into your space virtually, mind you, but right, and really sharing some of her heart and some of her art through cooking, right? Which is a very communal activity as well, like you said. Yeah. So
right.
very exciting.
Something that I wish I did more of, but I spent so much time sort of on my own, and it was just it was useless to cook for myself because I'm like,
Yeah,
this is
definitely not. Cook for yourself.
not what.
Oh, that's one of the things I love to do. I love to try different recipes, really try and edit recipes, with things that I like to add. And, I just made some steak teriyaki the
Oh,
other day, and it was just delicious. It was gone in 2 days. So.
Oh, I am very happy that I have a partner who loves to cook because I love food. I love to eat.
Yes.
I absolutely love to eat. But when
Yes.
it comes to the actual process of making it, I'm like,
Well, now
where
you
is
have
the
a big
cereal?
for them. You can surprise them.
Right? Actually, this is a really cool. So the event, remind me, the event is February 20th, right?
Yes, at 11 a.m.
At
Eastern
11
Standard.
a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to make sure that I add a link in so that people
Okay.
can sign up if they want to do it.
Sure.
It just sounds like such an awesome experience.
Yes, I'm so
Like
excited.
being, I was watching the Great British Bake Off the other night too,
Yes.
and I was looking at, I was like, I want to do this. I want
Right.
to learn how to do it. I was like, I'm never going to be this good because I'm just never going to commit the time that I need to. I'm watching
Right.
these people doing their technical challenges, and there's like
Right.
5 ingredients and no information beyond that, and
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
yeah, this
So
would
fun.
be.
But
I
yeah.
would love to see a Great British Bake Off of people who don't know how to bake and see how it went. Like kind of like those. What is it? The Pinterest challenges. Like
Yes.
that's me.
Yes.
Like look at this beautiful thing, and then look what I created. It's like,
Right. Look at the difference. What's going on?
so awesome. So if you were essentially, you were going to be, now I have found that with what I have done as a female, there have been challenges on a gender perspective,
Mhm.
particularly like working in conservation and working in entertainment to a degree as well, because there's sort of, there has traditionally been this attitude of women being like they're either the artists and they're like the
Right.
front person and everybody else
Mhm.
does all the behind the scenes and like
Right.
the production and the engineering, that's all
Mhm.
men.
Right.
And so, and I was starting to move into that and learn that stuff. I was
Mhm.
kind of like, what are you doing? You know, you don't know how to do that. Or as a photographer, well, that's
Right.
men, it's tech, it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm a female.
Right.
And then
Right.
conservation
Yeah.
was also very heavily dominated for a long time by men,
Mhm.
especially in the field.
Right.
So there was very much a challenge to overcome this stigma that, well, women can't do this, or
Right.
this is just, you're not strong enough, or you're not tough enough, or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, women have kids, guys. You need to like
Right.
settle down. Just if you're talking about tough.
Right.
But so have
Beyond
you,
force stuff, right?
right? Have you experienced that? And essentially, how have you managed to overcome that, or how have you dealt with it?
Sure. So actually, I have not. I will say that I have not. Like, definitely, because I think it's mainly because how I operate is relationally based, right? So I build relationships with people. Those people have their relationships with other people, and based on that, I have the conversation, right? So I think that for at least for me in the space that I have operated in, it has broken down some of those barriers for me because I have had people, for example, when I was doing the Staccato Beat magazine, I had a managing director for the magazine, and so he introduced me in different spaces, right? And so I didn't have that. And maybe it's because I had him introduce me in certain spaces that I was able to gain certain opportunities. But again, that's networking, right? And so because my business is relationship based, I actually haven't had some of those barriers presented to me, and I'm definitely appreciative and grateful. I think they say favor ain't fair, right? So definitely, I'm a believer in that.
Well, that's great though. That's actually very refreshing to hear. And
Yes.
it's nice to think that things are changing as well, because I am
Yeah.
starting to see, and I've people that I've spoken to have also said that they are starting to see, even like when they started out. A few weeks ago, I interviewed a friend of mine who's been working in conservation, and
Okay.
she's gay, and
Mhm.
she's in a field that is traditionally, again, like it's been very male dominated,
Right.
and she's really on this kick to bring more women into ornithology and birding
Mhm.
and non-gender binary, and just
Mhm.
expanding and opening the world up to more people that is
Right.
more inclusive.
Yes.
And she said when she first started out, it was definitely much more challenging, but
Mhm.
as the years have gone on, it is, I'm sure part of it is exactly what you said, is like you build relationships. She's built
Right.
relationships, and they started to
Yes.
see her as a person as opposed to a thing.
Right. Yes.
But also, it's just things also changing in a positive direction of
Right.
people starting to realize that, there's an element of what you look like in your background that obviously has merit because each of us has our unique experiences that we bring to
Right.
the table, and they're important.
Yes.
But also not discounting us because we have these different experiences, or we
Right.
look different, or um, or different belief systems and that kind of stuff. And so that's actually really awesome to hear. I
Yes.
love that. That makes me really happy.
For sure. Thank you.
Cool. So do you have any advice, just to wrap this up, because I know like we all we all have lives, and
Well, I definitely set aside some time for you, so for sure.
Well, no, I mean, I feel like the hour is always it's about a
Mm-hmm.
about a good balance to
Mm-hmm.
keep, because I realize also our attention spans are pulled in
Right,
90 different
right.
directions these days.
Yes.
And it is great to get people to focus in, but at the same time, I like just to keep it to a good solid, just around an hour. Um, do you have any sort of advice that you would love to offer out, any last minute, whatever, things that you'd like to offer to listeners? Tell listeners about you. Anything that you want them to know in particular about your journey, about the work that you're doing, how they can support you,
Yes.
um, all that stuff. And like I said, I will add all the links. If you want,
Okay.
I can even put your Clubhouse stuff in there as well. If you
Okay.
just
Sure.
up to you, entirely up to you.
Yeah. For
But
sure.
yeah, so if you were sort of like summing it all up, and you had if you were speaking to your younger self, let's do it that way.
Okay.
If you were speaking to your younger self, what would you tell them?
If I was speaking to the younger Ashley, little Ashley,
Little Ashley.
I was speaking to little Ashley, I would tell little Ashley three things. I like threes. So the first thing I would tell little Ashley is to focus, right? Focus is so important, right? You could be doing a lot of things with your time, as you can see now if you look at my life. But all those things that I'm doing right now have a commonality, a trend in them. And like I said, I was acting, I was singing, I was doing spoken word, I was, doing all these different things. And I was good at a lot of different things. But little Ashley needed to focus. So that's one of the main things I would tell little Ashley. Focus on that one thing. Because even though I am where I am, I can never say that I have arrived, right? That's one thing. But I can also say that, anyone can say if they had focused at a certain point, or if they did focus at a certain point, they're further ahead than where they would have been if they had not. So the second thing that I would tell little Ashley is to definitely implement time management. Time management is so important, right? So definitely, carve out time for yourself like I do now for the work-life balance, right? Carve out time for study, carve out time for work, and really, like take those little slots of time. I don't remember who it was, but they had planned out their day to like the 10-minute increments that I read an article about them. It was like one of those big like CEOs of the companies. Like literally, they plan out their day on the calendars, 10-minute increments. They knew what they were doing every single 10 minutes. Now I'm not saying be that extra with it, right? But definitely plan out your day. And the third thing I would say is something that my dad has really taught me and instilled in me, and that I'm trying to do more so now. And a lot of other people have talked to me about this too. And I want to give this advice to everyone because it really truly does work. The third thing that I would say is to write things down. Because, we're in this age right now of the manifestation and, vision boards and everything like that. To get back to the basics, write down the goals that you want to accomplish, write down the things that you want to do to get to those goals, and then really work to accomplish them. Work to check those things off the list. That goes back into time management and planning, right? But really write things down. That's what I would say is my three little pieces of advice to little Ashley.
Those are fantastic, because it's so true. Like especially again, given the time that we live in,
Mm-hmm.
it's getting harder and harder to focus.
Right.
But if you have a focus, and you're actually a perfect example of this, is doing so many different things,
Mm-hmm.
you've managed to find that focus through
Right.
it, and realize that what is driving you in each of these different areas
Yeah.
is this focus, and you've been able to
Right.
distill that focus down and say, this is what I'm pulling from this, and I'm still on the same trajectory. I may be doing 15 different things that don't seem like me at the time that they're related,
Right.
but I have that focus, that
Mm-hmm.
idea that's really driving it all, and that's how I'm carrying through, and why it all makes, even it might not look like it makes sense on paper,
Yeah.
it does make sense, because you know what your idea, like your mission statement is, so to speak.
Right.
And
Right.
you're building upon that and using these experiences to fall into and support that mission statement.
Right. Yes.
Time management, bless you, because that is so not that's one of those things that I struggle with. And somebody once told me the Pomodoro effect or Pomodoro method, not effect, Pomodoro method was a great thing, because it was kind of like that. It was,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a friend in college that used to do that. She used to like have it written down, literally
Mm-hmm.
to the minute. And I was like, do you actually follow this?
Right.
And she did, but she got everything done every
Right.
single day. It was amazing. She was like a
Yeah.
machine. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that is not me.
I
Uh,
right. I got my mom got me a planner for Christmas, and so what I do is, what I try to do anyway, is I'll write down a list of things that I want to accomplish every day. So I don't necessarily ascribe times to them, right?
right,
Check them off on my list when I accomplish them. That way I know that I'm accomplishing the purposes and the goals that I have for that day. So I might not
right.
have it down to the 10-minute increment, right? But I do have a list of things that I want to accomplish in that 24-hour or a 16-hour period, however long I sleep, right? So yes, definitely. That's what I try and do as far as time
Yeah.
management.
And that
Writing.
is, you're right. And writing stuff down is incredibly important. It's amazing how I've worked in some, a lot, as a writer, in an, oh, my dog is going crazy at the door. Lulu, come here, bub. He has, speaking of amount of time that he can focus on anything, he has
Right,
not been
right,
paid attention to for like 50 minutes, and suddenly he's like, Mom, I need your time.
right, right.
He's like my 2-year-old child.
Oh.
Um, yeah, he's very cute. He's very sweet, but he does think he's a human. So, writing things down and that connection with actually physically writing, using your hand to write things. Somehow, there's something with our physiology, and there he is, that it registers more deeply somehow with our brain when we actually
Yeah,
write it out and have it written in front of us, and
right.
how important that is because, like you said, you got your focus, you're managing your time effectively,
Right,
and you're writing out what you need to do. And it's like the rest of it sort of falls into place when you
right.
do that. My problem is I never manage to do them all effectively, consistently. And I'm the first to admit it. I am my own worst enemy.
Oh,
But
no. We
yeah,
all, at a certain extent, we have that thing that we do that drives ourselves crazy, right?
right,
Love
right.
it.
So I love it. All right, so that's it. Focus, um, focus, time
Time management.
management, writing it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's brilliant. It's brilliant advice. It seems so simple, and yet, it's like the thing that we never do, right?
Right, right, yeah.
Because we're like, oh, I could do. It's like squirrel, 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 squirrel.
Right, right.
And again, so easy with all of the new distractions that we have, and that's really, I mean, in a lot of ways, that is what it is. They are
Mhm.
distractions, and they can be good distractions, and they can be positively turned into things that generate the energy that we need, the connections that we need,
Right,
or they can literally be distractions to keep us from doing what it is
right.
that we need to be doing. And
A
me
great
being this,
example, being on Facebook, right?
yeah,
I normally mainly use Facebook for connecting, networking, and business purposes. At the end of the day, like I said, that 11:30, I'm getting on supporting people, right? But I don't strictly use Facebook as a social media platform. I'm not scrolling just for the purpose of scrolling, right?
right.
But you can get sucked into doing that, just being in people's lives, watching all their videos and stuff like that. I think Facebook is a great example of what you're talking about because you
Yep.
can use it for evil, you can use it for good, right? So, yeah.
Right. And that is always, like you said, coming back to finding that balance and finding
Right,
that work life balance, which is, what are you doing that serves you, that feeds your soul, that is, and it's not that you have to be working all the time. It's like
right,
we all need downtime, but it's finding whatever works for you that keeps you going in the way that works for you. Because
yeah,
at the end of the day, you're answering to yourself. Like
right,
everybody else's opinion about things is their life. It's like, what is everybody's opinion? Someone's opinion about you doesn't matter to you, or what's the saying? What someone thinks of you doesn't matter. I think
right.
it's something along those lines, and I'm getting it completely wrong, but um, yeah, it's their business. What someone thinks
Right,
of
it's
you
their
is their
business.
business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, not to say that you just go out there and just like, crashing and burning and just,
Right, right,
leaving a path of havoc behind you, but
right,
it's more or less you do what you can do in what you're capable of, and you push
right.
yourself based on you,
Yes,
and again, finding that balance and focusing and managing your time and writing it all down so you can get where you need to go.
yes,
I
for
love it.
sure.
Oh, well, I will hopefully see you on the 20th because I'm all game for this. It'll at least teach me how to make one dish.
Right, right. And so you can explore from there. It'll get you excited.
Not to mention, I'd love to connect with these people and like the people that are involved and just get, like you said, that sense of community because
Right.
it is so important, and we have so sorely been lacking in many ways
Yeah.
especially this past year. So,
Now there's a coupon code you can use. Valentine gives you $15 off.
oh, nice. Even better. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for your time and for
Thank you.
sharing your story and your gifts and your vision and all of the good stuff, your insights. Really appreciate it. And I love your message. I love what you're doing.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you so much for having me. It's truly been a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. All right. Well, like I said, I will add the links in so everybody can find you. Black
Okay.
Truth Media,
Yeah.
um, Black Motivation Broadcast, your
Yeah.
book, what is it? One Single Woman?
One single lady.
One
I'm sorry.
Single Lady. Okay. We'll
Yep.
have all those links up. Oh, there's so much. There's so much. It's like, your links thing is going to be like 4 pages long. And then at the end, it's going to be like, and she sleeps sometimes.
Right. Right.
So,
Thank you.
well, have an amazing day. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch, and I'll let you know when this airs.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Take care.
You too. Thanks.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Nature Knows. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and sharing us with your friends, or even leaving a review. We'd really appreciate it. For more information about today's guest, Ashley Jones, you can find her on social media at Black Truth Media and Grownups in the Industry. You can tune into her podcast, Grownups in the Industry, or check out the Black Motivation Broadcast or the Black Magic Minute radio segment. Her book, One Single Lady, A Guide to Single Christian Living, is available on Amazon. For more information about the brunch, the Grown Women Brunch with Chef Dawn Moss at Carolina Kitchen, head on over to grownwomenbrunch.eventbrite.com. If you purchase your ticket before February 13th, you'll receive a special curated box with your ticket. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.